Welcome to the Mary Mac Show, where we will be talking about your feelings, experiences, and pain following the death of a loved one. Hello, my friends, my warriors. This is Mary Mac of the Mary Mac Show, and I'm in the throes of doing a podcast series entitled Death by Fentanyl. But tonight, I am so grateful that Terry Almanza has joined us. She's based out of Michigan. Her daughter, Sydney, died of MDMA. Is that correct?
Correct.
Ecstasy at the tender age of 18 back in 2015. This is an illicit drug, and all of us are doing our best to get the word out so that this doesn't happen to other people's children. She's married to John, and they have 3 other children, her siblings. And she was a police officer with the Chicago PD for 28 years. She's now retired. And after Sydney died, she started the Drug-Induced the Drug-Induced Homicide Foundation. And you can find that online. And we'll leave all the links in the show notes so you can learn more. But right now, I am so blessed to be able to speak with her and learn her story so that more of you can understand what's going on with illicit drug trafficking and how it's ruining our teens and early young adult years, where children and young adults are being murdered with these drugs. So thank you, Terry, so much for being here today. I'm so grateful that we were able to get together tonight. And first off, I'd like to ask you to please tell us about Sydney's growing up years, your family life.
Okay. Thanks for having me, first of all.
Absolutely.
Sydney was just a beautiful, as you can see, just a beautiful young lady as a child, just perfect. She sadly lost her biological mother, Sherry, when Sydney was only 8 years old. Sherry had passed away very young from pancreatic cancer. My husband, John, and I met when Sydney was only 8 years old. And he was a Chicago firefighter, myself a Chicago police officer. Our kids all attended the same grammar school. We grew up blocks away from each other, and met and dated. He had 2 children that were the same age as my 2. So I often refer to them as my twisted twins. We were the Brady Bunch. Just very blessed to welcome Sydney and her brother Johnny into our home, and are just very thankful. But she was amazing. She was tiny, but fierce. She had, you tell her she couldn't do something, and she was going to do it. She was an athlete. She played volleyball, softball. She just it's a beautiful smile, funny, loved family. I just adored Sydney. Had friends, loved music, arts, animals, just a very well-rounded child, a joy to be around. When Sydney was very young, Sydney was the victim of repeated sexual assaults by a extended family member. That news was never reported. It was something that Sydney just felt that she would carry, and that it would cause problems in the family. And so this sweet little child, who had lost her mother and then was the victim of sexual assault, um, you know, just dealt with so much for such a young child. I
Right.
was very thankful to have Sid in my life. But I knew, as her teenage years came about, Sid was struggling with some things. Sid, her friends started changing. Her interest in playing volleyball, the passion, wasn't there like it used to be. Um, Her grades began to decline. She began to isolate herself, and I'd sit down with her and said, "What's going on?" This beautiful girl, that this portrait behind me is from her junior prom, and she was in a gorgeous red gown, and she just looked absolutely stunning. And we were taking pictures, and I remember going and checking in on her in the bathroom, and she was in tears, and
Oh,
she just was not comfortable with photos, and the trauma that she endured gave her such a different image of herself than what everyone else saw, and what was so very true.
right.
So Sydney, she struggled, for a while, and me, being the law enforcement officer, and this helicopter mom, wanting to going on with your kids. When your kids are struggling, you're going to turn the house upside down to try to save them. You want them to be happy in their life. And I could tell that she wasn't. She would smile, for everyone else, but
Right.
I knew that there was something that was going on with Sydney. And in doing a lot of digging, found out that Sydney had been victimized by an adult cousin when she was just a little girl numerous times.
Wow.
We reported it to the police, the Chicago Police Department. Sadly, the Chicago Police Department had said that too much time had lapsed, and it would be her word against his, and that we didn't want to put her through that. The offender was arrested, but the Cook County State's Attorney would not approve charges. I feel like that was very painful for Sid. It was just another letdown. And so I think Sid, continued to decline from there. And I noticed that, like I said, she had started hanging out with different friends, and experimenting with club drugs. And I wasn't okay with that. I was terrified. I was terrified that we would lose her, that something bad would happen, that she would go down this road. And she just had her whole life ahead of her, and she was
Yes.
just a magnificent young lady. And I worried about her. And sadly, she went to a party. She connected with some people, and she purchased some MDMA, which is ecstasy, which is a club drug. No fentanyl. Many people have said to me, "Oh, there was fentanyl in there, or you can't die from MDMA." Absolutely, 100%, you can die from MDMA. And she died on May 31st, 2015.
Oh my
She
God.
had just signed, she had just graduated, she had just turned 18. She had just graduated from high school. She had just signed a collegiate scholarship to continue in her volleyball career. She was
Yeah.
going to a music festival. She was so excited. She had her whole life ahead of her. But we lost her.
Mm.
So
And who found her?
her dad, um, her dad and her brother were home. Her dad found her.
Mhm.
I was actually, Sydney passed away in Chicago, Illinois, Mount Greenwood. Very nice community, Chicago, police and fire, city workers, real nice neighborhood. And I was actually in Michigan with my children when I got the call that Sydney was not breathing and that she was on her way to the hospital.
Okay.
But just you know, it's a horror that no parent should ever see
Yes.
live through. I don't my husband is a different man than he was the days prior.
Yep.
Seeing our precious, child, lifeless, is just something that you don't recover from. We survive every day, but you don't recover from that. You're not supposed to bury your children. You're not supposed to, I'll never forget myself and my husband and my children all going shopping for her for what she was going to wear in her casket. And I'm thankful that I was surrounded by my family. But that's just not something that you're supposed to do.
No. Like you said, parents aren't supposed to bury their children. It's the unnatural order.
Absolutely.
And too many of us have gone through that. I remember after Angela died, going through the store like around Christmas, and you pass the little girls section and you think to yourself, I'll never need to buy anything in there again. Things like that come back to you.
Well, our joy is, I was explaining to a friend how I would go to the cemetery and I would, leave flowers or balloons or hula hoops or the things that brought Sydney joy, things that, were Sid, that screamed Sydney. And I would go and clean it up. And, I get it, it's the rules. And, on certain dates you have to, but it would just be so crushing, and, it's all there's no manicures, there's no mani-pedi days, there's no shopping with Sydney, there's no going out for a cocktail, there was no 21st birthday, there will be no wedding day,
or grandchildren from her.
I have a grandchild and she'll never meet her niece, my other daughter brings my granddaughter to the refrigerator and she points to the refrigerator and says, where's Auntie Sid, and that's it, and for her to be gone and so many lives lost, so senselessly,
Yes.
is just even more devastating. To bury our children, to lose our children from an illicit drug, for this stuff to continue to, pour in, through our borders, and people look the other way, or place fault, on the victims or the parenting, is insane. These are human lives, and they matter, and they still matter. And I will tell her story. Many people take issue with me sharing what happened to Sydney when she was just a little girl, but it is so very important. And I know that many of Sydney's choices, Sid was trying to numb herself. Sydney had a lot of pain, and what this monster did to her changed who she was. And it was something that, I want, victims to know that you don't have to carry that, you have a whole community, a family, the church, so many people that loved her. I mean, her service was just nonstop, out the door. So many people loved her so much, and I can't, it's devastating to know that she just didn't believe that we could get through this, that there was other options, that her suffering, there could be an end, and I'm not saying that it's something that you ever get over, but I do believe that it is something that she could have healed from. But she would tell me, you don't get over things like that. You don't,
She couldn't see that that was a possibility.
she couldn't. And she would, she would go to we would, we had got into family therapy, and she went to therapy, and and she would tell the therapist everything that the therapist wanted to hear, and the therapist would say, she's good, she's fine. I said, she's not. She's got an eating disorder. She's over exercising. She hates taking pictures. She doesn't like to be touched. She's cutting, doing so many things, screaming out, from the inside, how deeply she's hurting. And, the therapist would say, no, she's good. She's doing good. And she
And you
was.
know that she was wearing her mask.
She was. She put on a smile for everybody else. Because she just that's just who she was. She just didn't, she never cried. She never complained. She just never wanted to be a burden to anybody, and she never ever was. And I want kids to know that you're not alone in this, and there's so many people there that love you dearly, and self-medicating is not the answer.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you think that this was like a one-time thing for her?
Her being victimized, or her
Her
use?
using the drug?
No. So I had, I was, I had gotten software to read her text messages, and the family thought, oh, that's so terrible.
No, you wanted to keep up.
I wanted to know, I knew that she was hurting. I knew that she was making bad choices. And I knew that in the dark, I couldn't help her, And so, like I said, I had software that I could, see her text messages and read her Safari searches and know where she was. And so I knew, for probably, everything it's grief brain, for a while, that at least I want to say at least 6 to 8 months that Sydney had been experimenting with club drugs,
Right.
MDMA, I think LSD. I think I'm not 100% about that, but MDMA, and and the person that had sold it to her was actually her cousin.
Oh,
And I had reported this to the mom of the cousin, and I wasn't okay with this, and I was worried about Sydney and the cousin,
sure.
and it obviously continued. So and I think that these kids think that it's just a club drug, it's just ecstasy, but
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's fun, and it's stop being stop bringing your work home, stop hovering, you think that you know everything, and give me some space, and you're being too overprotective, and I'm 18 years old, and I graduated, and I just want to have fun, and I wanted all that for her too. But having fun and experimenting with illicit drugs do not go together. You're just, you're going down a road that, is very, very scary,
Without it.
especially now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the more we move into these illicit drugs, to the extent that they are um, they're being used so much and available, like never before, in the amounts that they're available.
Nothing is safe.
No.
Nothing is safe unless prescribed by your physician and filled at a licensed pharmacy. Do not take it.
Yeah.
It is just not safe. I think I just read a story yesterday in Georgia about the vape pipes, and they were saying how those were laced with fentanyl, and those were actually a store had commented in the story and said, yeah, we are selling that exact, type of vape. And so
Wow.
been in the store, um, so yeah, it just it's very scary. It really is. And again, unless it's prescribed by your physician and filled at a licensed pharmacist, do not take it. Yeah,
Because you have no idea what's in that.
absolutely. I mean, where there's stories of kids that are like, okay, here's the prescription bottle and it says, whatever medication, Xanax or whatever.
Right.
Um, and it's not. And these kids are swearing, oh yeah, that's what it is. I'm telling you, I swear it. I've read stories, I've talked to families, and they're just, these drug dealers are about making money. They don't care,
Yeah. They don't care about anybody.
they could care less. So it's it is, it's terrifying. It really is. And it's sad that it's not more out in the in the public as to what a threat this is to our youth. There's so many parents that I'll speak with, and they've never heard of fentanyl, or like I've said, I've talked to law enforcement officers, and they'll say, you can't die from MDMA. And I said,
Oh no.
would you like to see my daughter's toxicology? You absolutely can. So yes, education, awareness, and accountability, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Will you tell me about how you and your family dealt with your grief after she died?
Everybody was different. My son joined the Marine Corps.
Oh, wow.
We remember we went to the therapist afterwards. We all went to counseling, or at least I think my husband and I did. And the first thing the therapist said is no big changes for at least 6 months. Everybody
Yes.
went to the house. Everybody was gone except for my husband. We got a timeout, where'd everybody go? But yeah, like all of us, have dealt with our grief differently. I'm, a lot more vocal. My husband, it would be difficult to walk in this kitchen and see my daughter's picture. For him,
Yeah.
very difficult. Which is crushing, because I couldn't imagine not. I mean, I love, every once in a while people will say, oh, I found this picture of Sydney, and it's like Christmas, a picture I've never seen of Sydney. Where with my husband, it's different, and I get we all grieve differently, so he keeps very busy. He's very handy, so he keeps very busy doing lots of work inside the house, outside the house, helping out with neighbors and friends and stuff. Like I said, my youngest son, he went and enlisted in the Marine Corps, and my other two, the two older ones, moved out right away, and they're doing okay. We all miss her terribly. I often say, like, even and our most joyous occasion, somebody getting married, a shower, we are still met with great joy because we are missing such a huge part of our family,
Yes.
So, we are already 8 years, and there's days it feels like yesterday,
Yes.
it's that painful still, but we're surviving. Um, I am the only one within my immediate family that is involved in my foundation. And that's okay, like I said, they have a real hard time being as vocal as I am. And that's okay. They
Yes.
support me in so many other ways. But we're hanging in there.
That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It takes a long time, so long,
Hmm.
and like you said, everyone does grieve differently.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I'm grateful that you started this organization,
Yeah.
and I'd love to hear more about it and what its primary intention is, because it's a little bit different than some of our other guests. And I feel really strongly that this is so needed. So, Terry, please go into this.
So I think I want to say we're probably one of the foundations that has um, been around, you know, one of the longest.
Well, yeah, 8 years. Yes.
Yeah. Um, but we are, I mean, absolutely partnered with, so many great families, so many that you've already, done podcasts on, who I absolutely adore. And I'm so thankful for their, support and partnership along the way. Um, but we are very different than most of the foundations. Our foundation really advocates for a criminal investigation following every suspected drug poisoning. And, I think after, so when Sydney died, the day of, immediately, I think being a law enforcement officer, immediately, my brain went to, you know, who did this? And
Sure.
I don't even know if my brain went to who did this, because I pretty much knew, like I had said, there was a cousin that was involved, that there was, some history, with the cousin. And so I just simply looked on the call log and had seen that there was, some phone conversations with the cousin that night. So I knew that night who was responsible. But I don't know. I think, you're just, when something like that happens, I knew what took place was criminal. I knew that, I would absolutely want, some sort of accountability, but I had never heard of the drug-induced homicide statute. And in Illinois, where Sydney was poisoned, that statute was founded in 1989. But,
Oh, wow.
mhm,
How did you
but
come across it? Did you start digging through the law?
yeah, so right after Sydney was poisoned, um, I was immediately told by law enforcement that it was not that it was accidental, that they were not going to investigate her case criminally, that there was no protocol to investigate these types of deaths criminally, and that Sydney made a choice. And so, I had said Sydney never made a choice to die, and I began to do a lot of research. And they had told me, a couple, oh, we're going to look into her phone and we're going to talk to some people. But the case was closed right away. So I knew that, nothing was going to be done. And just, in the exchange with, the detectives, I could tell that, this was going nowhere. So I did a lot of searching, and I had found out that neighboring counties were investigating these cases criminally and were pursuing the drug
Oh,
and homicide statute. So I reached out to, I believe it was Will County, and I believe it was Lake County, and spoke with the state's attorneys there. And they were great, and they started, sharing information with me as to, some cases that they had prosecuted, and sharing what the knowledge that I had felt that Sydney's case was, a prosecutable case. So,
did you live in Cook County?
yeah, I lived in Cook County. Sydney died in Chicago. Chicago police, like I said, they closed her case immediately. They just, would not investigate it. I felt like, I don't know, I was dismissed. People would say, you got to let this go. Like, this is tearing you apart. Like, you need to just grieve and you need to move on. And I couldn't. I couldn't. Someone gave my daughter. So the statute reads, the unlawful delivery of a controlled substance resulting in a death. Simple.
Wonderful.
No,
No ambiguity, directly to the point.
no one had to inject it in her, force it into her. There didn't have to be any money involved. It's a very, it's a great, I believe it's a great statute. Very simple, great. And so, after reading it, I thought that's exactly what happened. Her
Yep.
cousin, gave her this drug. Sydney ingested it, and she died. And I want, I'm thinking, so Sydney, Sydney ends up dying for the choice that she made. She ends up getting, this death sentence, for this choice that she makes. But yet the person on the other end, the dealer, walks away with zero accountability. How is that okay?
Right.
So, yeah, like I said, the Chicago Police Department would not investigate it. I then began to, and I had reached out to a couple other groups, and I had really had a hard time with people, supporting what I was, doing. People would say, well, your daughter, your daughter, she probably sold at one time in her life to support her habit as well. First of all, she wasn't an addict, and not that that makes them any less of a victim.
Right.
Second of all, this is something that she had just started, and it was something between her and her cousin. And if she was out there, peddling poison, then she should be held accountable, and maybe that would have been what turned her life around or saved her or what have you. But there has to be accountability. And I mean, that's as silly as saying, people who are out drinking and driving because they're alcoholics, we're not going to charge them with killing people when they get behind the wheel.
Yeah.
So, I really had a hard time getting even support from other bereaved moms. And I still don't understand it to this day. I wasn't looking for vengeance. I felt that that there should be some accountability, and these people needed to turn their lives around. They needed to fly right and get themselves straight, because it ended up being two people that sold to Sydney. It was her cousin, Cynthia Parker, and Cynthia Parker's boyfriend, Brent Tyson. Those were the two dealers. And, I think what would have been worse in the whole scenario is if all three of them had died. So, this is, going to jail is not about, this vengeance. It's about, rehabilitation, accountability, getting the help that you need, because obviously they're making bad choices, and how easily this could have been them, you know. But so, like I said, they would not investigate. I then decided, you know, hey, I'm gonna start a Facebook page, you know, called, we initially were called Forgotten Victims of Drug-Induced Homicide. And then there were cases that were beginning to be that were being investigated, and so we got rid of the forgotten victims and went with drug-induced homicide. And so the more vocal I got, you know, I think a Chicago police officer coming out and speaking out publicly saying, hey, you know, I lost my 18-year-old daughter. You know, here I am, a Chicago police officer. My husband is a Chicago firefighter. Between the two of us, we've got probably almost 60 years of dedicated service to the city of Chicago. And our 18-year-old daughter is poisoned by MDMA. And there's a law saying that what took place is criminal, and nobody's going to do anything, you know. So
Powerful message.
yeah, so they did. So I kind of forced their hand a bit. And they did. They brought both Brent Tyson and Cynthia Parker into the police station. They questioned both of them. They both admitted to selling Sydney MDMA. They admitted that it was a very pure form of MDMA, and that Sydney was an inexperienced user. You know, and to know that, one, this is your cousin, and also that they knew that she was struggling with some depression, you know, you know, and then to know that she didn't know what she was doing, you know, she's this inexperienced user, you sell her, I think it was a gram of MDMA, and, you know, she didn't know what she was doing, and she died, you know. And Virginia Krieger of Lost Voices of Fentanyl always says our kids are supposed to learn from their mistakes, not die from them, you know. So they both ended up being charged with drug-induced homicide, and they were both bonded out. So they were out of custody, fighting a Class X felony. While out on bond, they were both arrested in Orland Park, Illinois, for selling 110 hits of LSD and 1 gram of MDMA to an undercover police officer.
Oh,
yeah. So, I mean, so, you know, when people sit and say like, well, it's not going to bring your daughter back. Well, you're right. It's not. There's no happy ending for us. She's gone. But if doing what we're doing can save one life, you know, if I was to continue, you know, to just let it go, they weren't stopping. They were going to continue doing this. It's obvious, because even after they were charged, they went and they did it again, you know. But in 2018, they were both convicted of her homicide. Brent Tyson received a 6-year prison sentence. He served, I believe, less than half.
oh my.
And the cousin, Cynthia Parker, she received 1 year probation, because at the time of Sydney's homicide, Cynthia Parker was only a juvenile. So, you know, I don't know. Is it fair? No. You know, is it justice? No.
No.
You know, there's no justice when someone takes your child's life, you know. Justice would be that same, you know, fate, you know, but I wouldn't want that, you know. I wouldn't want another life lost, you know. That doesn't change, you know, what happened to Sydney. But if they can, you know, take their lives and turn them around and be productive and do all the things that they took from Sydney, you know, then I think, you know, I've honored Sid, you know. If I push to try to make sure that we get this message out to other kids, other teens, not to, you know, experiment with drugs, because it can take your life, you know, and not to sell drugs, because you can take a life. I think, you know, that's how we honor our children. That's how I honor Sydney, and that's how she continues to live on. in this message. So, so absolutely, you know, I mean, I think it's insane, you know, when, you know, families reach out to me and they say, yeah, the detective never called, or the detective never took the phone, or they left narcotics on the scene, or they said your kid is you know, your kid's a junkie and, you know, we're not going to investigate it. Do not accept that. That is
At all.
unacceptable.
No, no.
Unacceptable. You know, you've got to be your child's greatest advocate. You've got to read
Yes.
reports. You've got to find out what the criminal statute is. You've got to make sure that that phone has been inventoried and evidence digitally extracted, you know, any tollway records, you know, banking apps. There's just, you know, people say these are difficult cases to prove. I don't believe so. I really, I believe that, you know, our youth, they are tied to that phone, you know, and the phone is just a treasure trove of evidence. And, you know, law enforcement, our judicial system, go out and talk to these witnesses, you know, do your job and investigate these cases criminally. And thank you, you know, to you know, the law enforcement and prosecutors that are out there aggressively, you know, going after these dealers and sending a message, you know, to these dealers that it will not be tolerated and you will be charged, you know, with homicide. But you know, we've come a long way, you know, from back in 2015 when, you know, I was dismissed, and you know, to be a law enforcement officer, a Chicago police officer, and your daughter die in Chicago, and the department investigating her homicide, you know, closes her case and dismisses you, is crushing, you know. You
I
know,
would think so. After
the
all you did, I mean, all your dedication to the department.
we have this brotherhood, you know. We look out for each other, and you know, I wasn't asking anybody to pick up a case that took place in another suburbs, or, you know, this happened, you know, in the city of Chicago. And so that was tough. It was really you know, tough, you know, to not have the support of you know, the Chicago Police Department. I'll never forget, I was back to work, and I believe it was I worked in gang investigations right before I retired, and it was right before Mother's Day. And sadly, in the city of Chicago, we lose, you know, a lot of young, you know, teens to gang violence.
Yes.
And which is all connected, the gangs, the guns, the drugs, all of it. And so I'll never forget my office reaching out to you know, our bosses or what have you, reaching out to our office saying, hey, you know, we'd like to create a list of all the mothers that lost teens to, you know, gang violence in the city of
Wow.
Chicago, you know, and we're going to go out there and, you know, and connect with all these mothers, and you know, extend our condolences, because it's Mother's Day and it happened in the city of Chicago. And I just remember, you know, feeling, you know, so crushed, like, what about my daughter? You know, my daughter's first birthday in heaven was on Mother's Day, you know. So, you know, our children are victims too, you know, we're victims as well. And we want to be heard as well. And to think that, you know, we've lost, you know, a child, and then to not, you know, get, you know, those answers, that closure, that justice is even more crushing, you know. So and I thought, you know, in the beginning when this all started, if I can't get justice, and I'm a Chicago police officer in the city that my daughter was poisoned, and I can't get justice, how is any other parent going to get justice? How will they be heard?
Right. Yeah.
So I knew how important my voice was, you know. And so I'm super proud, you know, to share, like now, the former, he is now retired, Chief Brendan Deanahan, who was wonderful. He was the chief through the detective division. He worked with our foundation and with State's Attorney Patrick Keneally out in McHenry County, who was leading Illinois in drug-induced homicide prosecutions.
Wow.
And we came up with a protocol in Chicago for detectives to investigate these cases criminally, the steps that detectives need to take when they are handling any type of suspected poisoning. So that was huge. And then in addition, myself and another mother have been invited out to the Chicago Police Academy to address newly promoted detectives on this policy and share in our laws. So we've really come a long way. And,
Wow, that's major.
it really, from going to, hey, your kid made a choice, to, hey, now can you come on out and talk with the detectives, the first ones that are going to be out there investigating these cases criminally, is huge. So I'm
Yes.
thankful for Chief Deanahan. I'm excited to meet with the the new superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, because there's a new one on the way, and I will be calling. Just so excited. We have Drug-Induced Homicide Foundation has connected with families all over the US. We have, support from prosecutors all across the US, from, law enforcement officers. And so, I'm super proud of that. And I think Sydney would be too,
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
So
This is your advocacy is very unique, and especially the fact that you were a member of the Chicago PD. So that gives you even that much more credibility. And I love that. I think that's great.
Well, I think too, I remember so our foundation, we would go out in front of the courthouses, we'd go in front of the coroner's office, we'd go in front of the down to the downtown Chicago, and I remember going out in front of the courthouse, and all these Chicago police officers were walking right by us, and here we all are out there with these big signs of our children, and we're passing out, flyers and stuff, and they're just, continuing and walking, and it's crushing, I'm sure you understand, you said, being out there, it's, you've lost your child and you just want someone to listen. And I get it. Many of them have, worked third shift and they're tired and they got to get up in the morning and go right to court or what have you. And I get it. And, and I would say, hey, can you stop just for 1 minute? I'm one of you too. I'm a retired Chicago police officer, or I'm a Chicago police officer, and this is my daughter. And, and in going out, and speaking with the newly promoted detectives, so many of them coming up to me and saying, hey, you know what? I had a cousin, or I have a nephew, or, or I have a daughter that's struggling.
Wow.
It's, there's not too many families, I think, anymore that can say that this has not impacted their family in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is such an important message. And I'm so very thankful that we are being heard. And I hope, that this message, gives other families, the strength, the knowledge, to know that, when your loved one is unlawfully delivered a controlled substance that results in their death, it warrants a criminal investigation. Absolutely.
And how are the laws in different states here? Are they up to par, or is they nowhere near what is needed?
So they vary, but the majority of them do have a law that is drug-induced homicide, or something that is similar, catered to, drug-induced homicide. But many of them have felony murder, which, any state, can use that and prosecute this case. A lot, the DEA is now picking up on many of these cases and going after, these dealers, especially with this fentanyl and this xylazine. Years ago, 8 years ago, when we first started, I would get on the computer and I would, search drug-induced homicide or, death by distribution, and I couldn't find anything. And now it's just, so again, I am so thankful for our judicial system that they are, recognizing that these are victims and that these cases do warrant criminal investigation, and that this is a piece of turning around, what is going on here, that it is, the education absolutely is huge, and the awareness. But I absolutely believe that there has to be accountability. 100%.
Yes. There have to be consequences for these actions, and
Absolutely.
not enough people are not enough criminal justice systems in the different, areas, and the even down to local level. They're not doing enough.
Absolutely.
And I'm so grateful that you're stepping up to the plate and making sure that they're, that these agencies, that these criminal justice agencies or authorities, should be held accountable for this.
Mhm.
We can't, I mean, all the gangs, like you said, and all the trafficking and all, I mean, even down to all the illegal guns that are on the street. Nobody's doing enough about that, you
Yep.
know?
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. Well, I think it was our retired chief, Riccio. He had said something to the effect of, it is the drugs that are funding, these gangs to get the guns that are killing these innocent victims and that are
Yes.
shooting at police officers. And, so
Yeah,
it is this vicious circle,
right.
so when they say that drugs are this victimless crime, are you kidding me?
No.
So, in addition to, getting the word out to our judicial system, arming our parents. I think oftentimes there's parents that are like, well, the detective didn't call me back. Well, you know what? Pack a lunch and march your little butt down to that station and say,
Yeah.
hey, I'm here to see the detective that's assigned to my, my son, my daughter's,
Right.
homicide, and I'm not going anywhere until I get some answers. And, a lot of parents
I don't think enough parents, I don't think enough people who have lost children to murder, they don't understand their power. They don't understand what they can do and what they should do.
absolutely.
Okay. I mean, when I was involved with, crime advocacy, I remember so many families saying, I'd say, did you get in touch with the detective, or did the detective get in touch with you? Did the crime victim witness people get in touch with you? And they're like, I don't know who those people are.
Mhm.
And it used to break my heart because it was, they didn't know their power. They didn't know what to ask for. They just didn't. And so it's helpful when there's somebody like you or I who knows how to get that ball rolling for them and to make them feel empowered so that they can go in there, with the attitude of like, hey, you work for me, not the other way around,
Mhm.
you know.
Because if you don't, that's what I always, many of the, first of all, I'll say, I don't think that there's anything crueler of our judicial system than to task a bereaved parent with, fighting for justice. There isn't,
Yes. No.
we should be grieving, I should have, I should have been taking care of my children and my husband, and I wasn't, I was so, focused on, justice for Sydney's case, that I do feel in many ways I failed my children and I failed my husband, and you know, it is something that weighs heavy on my heart. But so it moms and dads and spouses and grandparents, we had two Pat and Papa Maloney, the greatest grandparents ever, in their, gosh, high 70s, and not that that's old,
Not anymore.
but one day we walked, and it had to be late July, I believe, and we walked from Cook County Medical Examiner's office to Cook County Jail or courthouse. And it was probably, I think, at least about a 2.5, 3 mile walk. And it was
Wow.
sweltering hot, it was so hot. And they were out there with their signs, and I mean, it just shouldn't be something that, we shouldn't be fighting for our judicial system to investigate, our kids' homicides,
Yes.
I'll never forget someone telling me about the whole Sackler case, and how families were out in front of, I believe it was Sackler family, but they were out in front, and they had big, beautiful signs of their children, and they turned the sprinkler systems on them, and I don't think that there's anything crueler of our judicial system than to task, a bereaved family member with fighting for justice for the child. It's the law. Someone poisoned our loved one, investigated, plain and simple. And I think that there are a lot of parents, that they're not capable of making that phone call, reading that autopsy, reading those case reports, going out there and talking to these people. It's something that law enforcement should be doing.
Yes.
But I am proud. I mean, it is just amazing what these parents, and like I said, grandparents and siblings, have the courage, to do, in memory of our children and our loved ones. So I'm super proud to be a part of this community. I hate it. I mean, so many other clubs I'd rather be part of, but I couldn't be prouder to be surrounded by just the most, courageous people, just wanting to, honor their kids, so yeah.
And it's amazing the people that you meet after such tragedy, and they become like your family.
Absolutely.
They're the ones who
They get
are
you.
there to listen to you when you're really having a bad day, because all the other people who said that they would be there for you when this happened, they kind of like,
They don't understand,
they don't understand, and they kind of fly by the
thank God.
wayside.
Thank God they don't. I always say that, like, I don't ever want anybody to, to understand, that, I mean, the first thing, you wake up, the first thing you think of it is your child. The last thing you think of, everywhere you go, sometimes I think of, I feel bad because I think, gosh, I feel like I think of Sydney more often than I do my other three, I don't know if it's just that she's not here, you're longing for,
Sure.
but thank God other people don't get that, and thank God that I do have the tribe of family members that do support me, and I'm not standing alone in this. Yeah. And in addition, not just family, but law enforcement and prosecutors and the media, and so I've been blessed. Absolutely.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So glad. Well, I'm grateful that you have, graced us with your presence and told us everything that you're working on, and especially about Sydney and her life and your love for her and your husband's love for her and family's love for her. And I appreciate your being with me today.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you might like to touch on before we close?
No, thank you so much. I thank you for having me, and I am so very sorry for your loss as well. And
Thank you.
continue to shine and do what you're doing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Terry. So it's been a wonderful time together. And I thank my audience for listening in and watching. And please do share this episode with others who need to hear this message. It's very important. All our children are dying from illicit drugs, and one time, just one pill can kill someone. And you need to educate yourself and educate your children. So please share this, subscribe here, and like and review. And also, please comment and let us know if you've endured this sadness, the sorrow as well. So thank you again, Terry. I look
Thank you.
forward, I look forward to speaking to you again at some point.
Absolutely. God bless.
God bless.
Take care.